Welcome to the Designated Drinker Show, the podcast that's raising the bar on craft cocktails. I am your host, Louise Solis, and with me is my very, very talented friend who can always be my road dog, the mixtress, DC Gina.
Hi, Louise.
Hi, lovely.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. Where are you at?
I'm in Capitol Hill. I'm in Washington, D.C. at Buffalo and Bergen, and it's a lovely day, and I'm just looking outside the window thinking, I hope everyone gets their vaccine soon.
Yes. Sign up, pre-reg, do whatever you got to do. Get those shots in your arms.
Yeah, so you can get back in this bar. We're lonely.
Exactly. My arm's sore. I got my first one.
Yeah, I love that.
So I'm halfway there.
That's right.
All right, Jen, we'll take you a little back in time. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Do you remember the 1977 film Smokey and the Bandit?
I mean, I know it. I don't know it, but yes.
Okay, so I was a kid in 1977. I know I don't look it, but I was. And I remembered the basic storyline, but what I didn't remember, which I think is funny how it ties into the show, it was a movie about two bootleggers attempting to illegally transport, get this, 400 cases of Coors beer from Texarkana to Atlanta. And now Cletus Snowman, he was the trucker pulling the beer. And the bandit, who was played by late, great Burt Reynolds, of course, he drove a Pontiac Trans Am. And his whole job was just to distract the Smokey. And, you know, good old Texas County Sheriff Buford T. Justice. That's the whole show or movie in a nutshell. It actually did become a show later, but yeah, kind of hilarious.
Yeah. To think that was real, yeah.
Yep. We're talking about getting real. So it may have been a very silly plot, but Smokey and the Bandit was the second largest earning movie in 1977. It earned over $300 million with a budget of only $4.3 million.
Wow.
So that's a whole lot of profit. It was second only to, of course, Star Wars, which earned more than $775 million. So, but still, $300 million on such a silly plot. And here's another cool thing about this movie. It's where Sally Fields and Burt Reynolds fell in love in real life.
Aw.
Yeah, see?
I didn't know any of that. Yeah. I'm into it.
Good. And here's why I bring this up. So speaking of those who once dreamt of taking on the open road as a long-haul trucker, let's introduce today's designated drinker, shall we? He is no Cletus Snowman. No, he is not. But he is the Central Midwest Regional Director of the Conservation Fund, Clint Miller. Welcome to the show, Clint.
Welcome.
Thanks, Louise. Appreciate it. Thank you, Gina. Appreciate it.
That's quite an introduction. Are you going to tell me that you were like trying to deter police officers, or what goes on?
No, it's an origin story that actually how I got into doing what I do today. So as Louise mentioned, I do work for the Conservation Fund. We're an organization that applies land conservation and natural resource-based economic development together. And where those two sort of parts of our mission come together, we're super comfortable. So working forests, working lands, working farms, gateway communities into important, beautiful places. So I'll talk more about the fund later, but it does talk about how I got into the business, which is I wanted to be an over-the-road truck driver. I was inspired by the movie that ran from about 1979 to 1981 called BJ and the Bear, which was even sillier in some ways than Smokey and the Bandit. And it was a trucker that was an independent contractor, drove around the country with his sidekick, a chimpanzee. And they solved mysteries and got into these wacky little crime situations. And I thought that was the coolest thing that I could do.
Wait, Clint, was that a chimpanzee or an orangutan?
The orangutan was Clint Eastwood.
Oh, gotcha.
If you remember, that was Clint Eastwood. That was in, I'm just going to space out the name of the movie, but I think that was Clint Eastwood. So this was the chimpanzee.
That's funny.
And I grew up on mutual.
I think we're dating ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. I grew up on Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. So Marlon Perkins was the host, and he had this sidekick named Jim Fowler, who unfortunately passed away just a couple years ago. But Jim used to jump out of the helicopter and wrestle the anaconda to the ground, which is what Marlon would narrate. And, in Sunday nights in 1970s, you didn't have much for TV. It was ABC, CBS, NBC, and PBS. And there was a period of about 2 hours every night you got to watch shows. So I was fascinated by, Jim Fowler. Well, when I got to high school and ready to graduate from high school, I wanted to be an over-road truck driver. That didn't sit well with my mother or my father. So I went up to the university. It was the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and I spent a day touring the various programs. And there was a professor named Scott Craven, who was a professor in the wildlife department, that gave a presentation about what it was like to be a wildlife biologist. And he described to a T what it was like to be Jim Fowler and how you could get there. And so I entered that. I registered for school that day. I got in. I got enough scholarship money. And back then, tuition was $490 per semester.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
I got enough money to be able to go to school for a couple of years. And I graduated with my bachelor's degree. And I spent 14 years as a wildlife biologist doing Jim Fowler things. Awesome, really adrenaline pumping, fun work. And then I moved myself into the work that I do today, which is land protection, where I'm really doing a lot more real estate activity and legal activity and working with partners than I do jumping out of helicopters and wrestling the anaconda to the ground. So thank you, Louise, for bringing back the memory of how I got into the business that I do today.
Always got to find a unique way to open the show. And when you drop that little nugget, when we do, so everyone knows, we do a little pre-interview, get to know each other. When he dropped that little nugget, I knew that was the one I was going to hook into. So thank you.
And thank you for dating me. I appreciate that.
Well, you and I together, huh?
Well, now I want to see what he does. I want to see somebody wrangle an anaconda. That's what I'm going to do next.
Yeah, now we got to look up. Now we're going to have to go do the Googles and see if we can find any dirt on him.
Yeah.
I have terrific pictures of me with a variety of wildlife, and some of the wildlife biologist stories are just crazy. And I'll tell you one little nugget that I think might be a little fun is back in the early 90s, a good friend of mine was doing his graduate work studying the Everglades snail kite, which is a small hawk-like bird that lives just on snails, Everglades snails specifically, and they live between Lake Okeechobee and the Everglades, and they're endangered. And at least at the time, they were very endangered because many of you may know the Everglades are significantly impaired compared to what they used to be, particularly because of water issues, water management issues. So it's a huge conservation concern. Anyway, he was studying these birds, and he was having troubles capturing them. He needed to capture them to put a radio transmitter on them in order to track where they go. And I had used at one time a shoulder-fired net gun, which is basically what it sounds like. It's a capture gun. It's a little shoulder-fired thing, and net would come flying out with projectiles and would wrap up the animal, and the animal would be captured. And then you can do mark the animal if you needed to. Well, he called me up, and I arranged to go down and visit with him for about 5 days in Lake Okeechobee and the Northern Everglades, and we trapped snail kites. And we actually would chase with an airboat, again, all permitted with the partners at Fish and Wildlife. We chased them with the airboat alongside. We'd shoot the net gun. It would capture the bird. The bird would drop in the water. We'd grab the bird, and then we'd put a radio transmitter in. And back in those days, the radio transmitters were nothing like they have today. And now they've got these little tiny radio transmitting units. And it was just a stunning opportunity to spend some time. But what I was going to say is that I am terrified of snakes and creepy crawlies. And the very first bird we knocked out of the air, we couldn't get the airboat turned around fast enough. We were afraid of hurting. There was some great blue herons nearby that we were afraid their nests were there, and we didn't want to hit those. So he made me jump off the front of the boat into Lake Okeechobee in the muck up to my neck. And I kind of plodded over and got the bird, put it on the airboat. He had come and picked me up. By the time we stopped in order to put the radio transmitter on the bird, I had taken all my clothes off because I was terrified I would have some sort of creepy crawly or snake in my clothes. And it took us maybe 20 minutes. And I had come, to process the bird. So I was in the blazing sun for about 20 minutes. But for a guy who just came out of Colorado winter, I was so sunburned I couldn't sit down for 3 days. Creepy, crawly, fun little story.
Yeah, that's really funny to think somebody who went out to like spend his life in the wildlife in like the great outdoors is afraid of creepy crawlers. That's very funny to me.
Ugh.
I spent my EMT career, so emergency medical technician career, for almost 15 years, and I was rarely, in fact, I don't ever recall having to leave the scene of any sort of call, though we had horrific accidents, really bad medical calls. Never had an issue. And a lot of times I was the last, I would say, the last man standing. But when my oldest son got a nosebleed when he was 4, I just about passed out. And I held the Kleenex here, put this on your nose. Dad's going to go sit down. When I would sit in trainings, all my fellow EMTs would geek out on the gross pictures they would show. And I would just be in the back of the room with my eyes closed, trying to, do my Zen moment, just to not even look at the pictures. I just cannot, unless the pager had gone off, I can't stand the sight of blood. Go figure.
So you and I share that. I pass out at the sight of blood. I've done that quite a few times. It's very funny. It's not very dramatic. It's very slow. And it starts with a, oh, 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 oh. And it's very funny. It's a slow process, but it's like, again, we'll go back to old school when we used to turn off the old TVs that had TV tube in them. It would go have the little white light in the center and slowly go off. That's what I experience every time. And every time it happens, I'm like, stop being stupid. You're fine. You're going to be fine. But I can't handle it's psychological and physical, apparently, because I guess what's happening is your capillaries in your lungs are closing or shutting. I don't know, something. Someone told me. So anyway, you and I share that. Wasn't
a good trait to have as an EMT, but it never happened on scene. I got razzed about it for 15 years.
I'm sure. But I applaud you for going through it anyway.
I love that story, though. I feel like you have more stories like that. So I'm like excited.
Well, if you think about it, I'm starting to see a pattern develop here. First, you're afraid of blood, but you're an EMT. You're afraid of creepy crawlers, but you go out into conservation and the wildlife.
Maybe nowadays, all I do most of the time is work with lawyers and real estate agents, and I'm afraid of both of them. So
there you go.
And as well, you should be.
Maybe that's what it is.
So you like to face your fears head on and conquer them, because that's what that is.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe that's what it is, Gina. You've got it. I'm an introvert, and this pandemic's been the best thing ever. I don't have to go out and meet people, and my business is all about developing partnerships and meeting people and gaining trust, and it's great. I just sit at home and do nothing.
I'm sure.
Kidding.
I'm sure that's not true, but it is funny to think that.
So, Clint, when we were talking, you were telling me, which I thought was really interesting, about how conservation works, about the working farms or the working forest. Can you give our listeners a little more in-depth explanation to that? Because that was eye-opening for me.
Yeah, I think I can. So the group I work for, the Conservation Fund, is sort of a standout in our business. What I tend to tell people is we're the largest land conservation group you've never heard of. We're not big. We're a couple hundred employees across the country. We only really work in the U.S., but we do anywhere from $250 million to $500 million worth of real estate activity on an annual basis.
Wow.
And what we're doing, we've got when people take a look at our website, you'll see all kinds of different things that we're involved in. We have our Natural Capital Investment Fund, which is offering finance and advice to small businesses. It's about creating jobs. We have a Resourceful Communities program that was developed long ago because they recognize the tie-in with these beautiful natural areas that we're working on. Poverty oftentimes was right outside those areas because people weren't earning an income that was sustainable in those communities. We have a loan program for small nonprofits where we loan them funds in order to accomplish their missions, their conservation missions. So we have all these different things that we do, but at the core of what we do is we provide financing. We provide real estate expertise and financing to be able to walk in and help our partners accomplish their conservation objectives. So when it comes to these working programs, so I'll use the Working Forest program as sort of an illustration. we've working for forests, these big commercial timber forests in the U.S., mostly in the north, southeast, and then in the northwest, are disappearing because they are being, bought by real estate investors who use the timber, sometimes hard, sometimes aggressively, not always, but they use the timber and take some revenue off the land from the timber. And then they sell what are called the retail lots. They'll sell all the little lots around the lake. They're lots that have access to the rivers. They'll sell the lots that are adjacent to the roads. And so you've carved up a big part of that forest, or they'll start carving up the whole forest. So what that does is it doesn't allow that forest to be managed as a large, contiguous forest, like it might have in a way that would be reflective of the way a forest might have behaved naturally. Big fires, big windstorm events, insect outbreaks. So it interrupts that. So one of the things that we do is we are able to go out and acquire these big forests. These are multi-million-dollar land acquisitions. We purchase those forests, then we sell conservation easements. So basically a restriction on the property that keeps it from being developed, but also typically provides, and most often provides, a permanent public access. So it's like public land, but it's not owned by the public. And then the underlying fee, the underlying ownership gets sold to somebody else who wants to manage it as a forest, who wants the timber revenue. So the work continues on the forest, supporting the local economy, whether it's recreation or wood products. And then somebody else owns the property and it still stays on the tax rolls. At the end of the day, there's permanent conservation. So we look at that as kind of how we would describe a working project where we've, hopefully sustained jobs in that community. We've met the conservation objectives. And oftentimes for our partners and the people we work with, it's often done at a fraction of the cost it would be to, say, buy it and permanently set up a preserve or a nature or wilderness area.
That's great. To me, I've never thought about land behaving when you said that, like the natural behavior. I was like, well, of course it does. Those are words that
So smart.
but I've never thought of it that way. But it makes sense in that you're not shutting down the opportunities for capitalism. Here we are. It's true. And to your point, helps feed families and sustain life. Absolutely. But a human life, as we know it, but then to be able to sustain that forest and not lose all of the other things that we need as humans to conserve, that just feels like a win-win.
And that's, of course, that's the way we feel. It's a pretty unique mission. We are a very unique organization. We don't have a membership, but we still obviously accept donations. We are a nonprofit, but we are focused on being creative. We've got business-like attitudes, business-like minds, pretty risk tolerant, and we're very innovative. Some of the things that we've done at the Conservation Fund, nobody else has tried before. And we're willing to take those risks because, we see we have to step up big. And our goals for example, the forest conservation are enormous. We're talking hundreds of millions of dollars worth of capital that we need to do this work.
Yeah.
We don't have it in hand, but we are working on, relationships with funders and people with like minds that are willing to take a risk and do something big.
That's awesome. We have so much to cover, but Gina, what if we do a cocktail right now? What do you think?
Yeah, we can do that. I'm gonna walk around. Yeah.
Briefly, as Gina goes around, about the Ozark Project you were telling me about, that I think is kind of cool because you kind of see the cause and effect. One, it directly reflects what Gina does and how she, pours these wonderful cocktails, and how your efforts actually make for what she puts in a glass even better.
Louise, great question. So some of the work that we've been doing in the Ozarks of Missouri, in particular, has been looking at large forest conservation projects. And there, when I talk about large forest projects, 1,000 acres of ownership in that part of Missouri is big. And so we're trying to target some of those large remaining ownerships, particularly from landowners who are saying, hey, look, I'm done owning this. My kids don't want to own it. They don't hunt, or, nobody's interested in farming anymore. And a lot of those places do have forestry, a big forest component, because the Ozarks, these rolling hills of southern Missouri, are filled with these beautiful oak forests. And I was told recently that the oak market, and in fact, I just found that out about here where I live in southeastern Minnesota, the oak market is going through the roof. And the reason, or one of the reasons given for the oak market going through the roof, is the demand for oak staves for barrels. And my understanding is that because of the part of the craft cocktail industry and the demand for casks and barrels, there is a resurgence in the interest in oak and other wood, specialty wood products that are coming out of these deciduous forests like the Ozarks in southern Missouri.
See, Clint is actually single-handedly making sure we get good barreled spirits, Gina.
Craft cocktail conservation.
I like everything that you guys are saying. And I'm thinking to myself right now, we're going to make this cocktail. And I just want to make sure I have everything. All right. So we were listening to, so Louise always gives me like a little bit of hints and notes and stuff about like what the guest likes and what you do. And I want to kind of get inspired by you. And I am definitely inspired by you. And what we're going to do today is make the salt of the earth. And that's what I think that when I hear everything that you're doing, it's what I think of with you is like, you know, wanting to conserve land and keeping everything, you know, just beautiful and, you know, working so that, you know, the next generations can enjoy it is what I think of, right? So this cocktail is something a little bit smoky. We're gonna use mezcal, but if you wanted to in this cocktail, you could use a different spirit. If you wanted to use bourbon, you could. I really like the mezcal on this. I'm gonna use just a nice smoky mezcal. And I'm going to use 2 ounces of that. And then we're going to put in 1 ounce of carrot juice. And I think I want to make a little edit to that and say that you should put in 1.5 ounces of carrot juice because you're using pre-bottled and so am I. If you were using fresh carrot juice and you juiced it in a juicer, I would say 1 ounce is more than enough. But if you were using something that you bought in the store in the fresh aisle like Bolt's House or Lakewood, you're going to want to use 1.5 ounces so you get that good carrot taste. And then we're going to use 1/4 ounce of lemon juice and then 1/4 ounce of lime juice. And the reason why you're using the 2 different ones is because the lime juice is a bit sweeter than the lemon, and the 2 together really make the carrot taste like carrot. It's a joke. Any kind of vegetable always needs a little bit of citrus to taste more like the vegetable when you're using it in a cocktail. And then we're going to use 1 ounce of Cointreau. And if you don't have Cointreau, you could use triple sec or something like that. And then we're going to use 1 pinch of sea salt. I picked some Maldon sea salt because it's got a little nice smoky characteristic to it. Can you use different ones? Yes, be very careful. The only thing I say don't use is any iodized salt. It is too pungent. And that would be kind of like that granulated table salt. So if you can't find anything else, use a kosher, just like a kosher salt from the grocery store would work just fine. So the next thing is we're going to serve this up in a chilled glass. You could do that ahead of time if you want to. I'm going to do it right now because I completely forgot. And there's no shame in my game. So I will just chill a glass real fast. And if you want to serve this drink on the rocks, you absolutely can. And if you are juicing ahead of time and you have a juicer at home and you live that lifestyle, which I love, you could save some of the fronds from the top of the carrot and use that as your garnish as well. All right. So we have that in our shaker tin. And now we are going to shake all of our ingredients. And we're going to do it on a little right hand. You got to keep going. Perfect. So you should have a really nice like froth at the top at this point. And if you don't have a froth on the top of your glass that's a different color than the carrot juice, you need to shake a little bit longer. And we're going to strain our drink. And this drink doesn't require a secondary garnish because you already put the sea salt in it. And I wouldn't put anything else on it unless you had a carrot frond. That would be quite lovely. I do not have the carrot frond right now, but it doesn't need a lime or a lemon or anything else.
Nice. It's really pretty. Very pretty. What do you think, Clint?
I like it. I think I'd put more mezcal.
Yeah. 2.25 ounce would work for sure.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's Good point. No, that's delicious. Thank you.
The carrot will give you the idea that it's healthy, and then there it is. But one of the reason why I also chose carrot is because carrot needs really beautiful land and like good land in order to grow. And we're going to lose our carrots if we don't take care of our earth in a better way. And I always say to people, I'm like, before you throw something in the ground or you're getting something, just remember that your carrots, your potatoes, your, tubulars are all coming from there and you're going to eat it. So just remember, do you really want to throw that? And people they're like, what? And they're like, yeah, I wouldn't do it.
I think it's one of those things. If you think about, as again, I'm going to date myself. When the term you throw it away, what is away? Where and I think if you can be more conscious of that, of what you're just throwing in your bin is going somewhere else as well. What does that mean? What is away? But or like in the fact that we think about give a hoot, don't pollute. I saw an episode of Mad Men, which is funny, because it's set back, and they went on a family picnic, and at the end, they just lifted the blanket and threw all the rubbish on the ground and got in their car and drove away. And you think about it, people used to empty their cigarette ashtrays out the window of their car. It was just common.
I drive 270 every day, and I hope anybody that's listening to me knows this. I see what you throw out your windows, and I find it appalling that you have the nerve to drive a Tesla and then throw your drink on the floor. You need to get better at that. But I also think what you're doing, Clint, is an incredible effort in order to endure this planet and our country and food and sustainability and, wood. Everyone says, wood staves for alcohol, floors for your houses, timber to build a house. I mean, it's a lot. I don't think people realize where these things come from.
Gina, I think one of the things that I hope is a lesson that we all take out of this pandemic. And Louise, I do celebrate having had my first shot a few days ago. I'm glad that's happened.
Cheers.
Yeah, no kidding. Cheers to that. I do hope that we, after this pandemic, and particularly the land conservation community, the healthcare institutions, and then people who have been confined at home, really celebrate and embrace is the opportunity to access the outdoors. That of anything that I do that I'm most proud of, and of our organization does that I'm most proud of, is creating access opportunities for the outdoors. I do realize that things like working forests are really important for jobs, for the economy, for the protection of lots of different species of forest nesting birds or wolves or bears. But there's also just the trails in people's backyards. It's the open space. There's 1,600 land trusts across the country, similar to the Conservation Fund, but much smaller. A lot of them are mom and pop shops that just work in little areas. And they are working right in your backyards where everybody lives. Our local governments are working on trail projects that provide people access. And we know now that was more important than ever during this pandemic when everything else was shut down. We couldn't go to the mall. We couldn't go to the movies. We couldn't do other things. People discovered the outdoors. And, I hope that everybody really understands the importance of those open spaces as we go forward, continue to support the work that land trusts and groups like the Conservation Fund do, but also find new ways of partnership. And I think, certainly their healthcare institutions understand the importance of good health. And there's no better way to do that than giving people opportunities to be able to walk and to recreate outdoors. I hope that there's a resurgence not only in that, but also in the commitment to funding those kinds of things, especially at the local and state levels, where it's really seen as really a driver of a lot of local economies. So, yeah, great sentiments.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, Gina, we didn't do our barkeeping. Where are they going to go?
You're going to go to designateddrinker.show for the recipes and how to find the conservation efforts and what's going on, right? And Louise's personal diary from the 6th grade. Since we've talked about Louise's growing up in the 70s. Where are we going, Louise? What?
We're going to send everyone to designateddrinker.show. Exactly what Gina said. You're going to find the recipes to this cocktail and all the other cocktails from all the other episodes. And we will definitely have links directly to all of the work that Clint and his organization is doing. And to make it even simpler, if you're on your smartphone listening to us, all you'll have to do is swipe up and all the episode notes will give you links to all of those things as well. There you have it. We've done our housekeeping. Good job, Gina.
Yeah. I'm feeling pretty impressed.
Good.
Is it my turn? It's my turn.
Not yet. I've got one more thing.
Okay.
So, Clint, will you please tell us, and this is going back to my hometown, which is funny, as we're talking about my childhood and apparently this episode is all about me, about my hometown in Hannibal, Missouri. Will you please tell us about the new state park there?
Well, yeah. So it's not a new state park, but I will tell you about the project.
Oh.
So, and that's okay. We tried to make it a state park, but again, when I said earlier I talked about the local governments and them stepping up. The city of Hannibal stepped up on this one. So this is homegrown. Yeah, it's one of my favorite projects I think that I've ever done. It's certainly a career highlight. It was very complicated, but in a mine, an underground limestone quarry or mine up in the bluffs above the Mississippi River, exists a population of rare Indiana bats. They're an endangered species. They're very small. They're about just a couple of inches long, a little bitty 6-inch wing spread. The world's largest population of rare Indiana bats lives inside this mine, which has 17 miles of passages, 36 giant entrances, because they drove trucks in and out of there for a very long period of time. So you can walk from Mark Twain's home in downtown Hannibal right down to the park.
Wow.
Yeah, on the new paved bike trail that we were able to create. There's 6 miles of unpaved mountain biking and trail running opportunities. And you will also get a chance to see the giant entrances to this park to the mine. And there are bat-friendly gates. So basically it allows the bats to come flying out and it keeps people from going in, because the biggest threat to this bat population was the people going inside the mine itself and disturbing the bats while they were sleeping during the winter time. Once we removed that threat, the bat population there has stabilized, even though the bats in general across North America are suffering from a disease called white nose syndrome, which is a disease that they catch and can be fatal. It's very fatal to bats. But this population has so far been able to survive some of that, partly because we think we provided a great habitat for them. It was a complicated project. We bought the role that the Conservation Fund played was purchasing the property from the landowner, giving the property to the city of Hannibal as a new park. We also did a tremendous amount of environmental cleanup. Gina maybe Louise, you brought this up earlier about the give a hoot, don't pollute. This was a former mine and it had railroad tracks on it. It had a processing facility for limestone. It required a lot of environmental mitigation. We took care of all that. I did most of that contract work and served as the general contractor for the project for the most part. And then when we got it all done after 2.5 years, we handed it over to the city of Hannibal. It's one of their most popular parks and most visited parks that they have. And they have a lot of bat-related programming around it. So yeah, great place. You get a chance to come visit Hannibal, Missouri, and go see the Sedalis Nature Preserve.
That's so cool.
Yeah, I already, my brother doesn't live very far from there. And I said, you have to go to the Bat Festival and tell me all about it.
They have a bat festival annually. Yeah.
I love that.
All right, Gina, now I do think it's you.
Okay, well, now I feel like I have to change it. All right. So I always have one question. So I'm always intrigued by people that, identify themselves with one spirit animal. And they're like, I really identify myself with a snow owl because you can hide in plain sight, in the winter. And, it's very regal and I can swoop in and, whatever. If you could identify yourself with one spirit ingredient, and it could be for food or drinks, what would it be and why?
That's a great question. It's something I've never had to give thought to. And off the top of my head, if I were to pull something off, I'm telling you, it just popped into my head. It was a Morel Mushroom. So if you're familiar with Morel mushrooms, they're reasonably rare, difficult to cultivate. And they're a little mysterious where you find them. And people protect their Morel sites, their picking areas. So if I were to pick one of those that would make me, sort of describe sort of the way I kind of approach things, it's the Morel Mushroom.
That's awesome.
I love that. Doesn't a morel only grow under like a decaying oak tree? Is it oak? What kind of tree is it? It's a specific tree.
I think they can grow on several different species of decaying trees, but it is a decaying tree. Usually it's an elm tree is what I remember. And around here, we tend to look for elm trees.
Elm. Okay.
It's our first fungi.
We've done a lot of foraging during this pandemic, and ramps are our thing here. But I love that answer for morels. Oh, that's so good.
You put me on the spot. It's the first thing I could think of.
There you go. A fun guy who likes to be fungi. Who knew? On that bad dad joke, I'm going to close the show. Thank you for coming and hanging out with us, Clint. Until next time, we can all be together. Be safe. The Designated Drinker Show is produced by Missing Link, a podcast media company that is dedicated to connecting people to intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Also in the Missing Link lineup of podcasts is Rodger That, a podcast dedicated to guiding you through the haze of dementia, led by skilled caregivers Bobbi and Mike Carducci. Now, if you're looking for a whole new way to enjoy the theater, check out Between Acts, an immersive audio theater podcast experience. Each episode takes you on a spellbinding journey through the works of newfound playwrights, from dramas to comedies and everything in between. Find Missing Link's League of Podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe, download, and review the shows. Your review helps our shows reach new audiences. To find out more about Missing Link, visit missinglink.company. That's missinglink.company.